Oh hey, Matt from Questionus Eruptus. Have you ever wondered how much caffeine is in your morning cup of coffee? Turns out there's a lot of variables that can go into figuring out the answer. The type of coffee bean is the first variable. There's lots of different types of beans, and different beans have different characteristics, different levels of caffeine. The second thing is how they're roasted. If you have a light roast or a medium roast or a dark roast, those all will influence how much caffeine is in your coffee. Typically, a lighter roast actually has a lot more caffeine than a darker roast. If you're looking at both ends of the spectrum, the more you roast it, the more caffeine essentially kind of burns off in the process. Whereas a lighter roasted bean has a lot more caffeine by comparison. Then there's the type of coffee too. You got regularly brewed coffee, espressos, instant, and decaf. All of these make a big difference on how much caffeine is in that cup of coffee. Brewed coffee is the most common way to make coffee in Europe and North America. That includes us here in Canada and the US. Basically, that's pouring hot or boiling water over your coffee grinds and usually using a filter as well. You can do it by machine, you can do it using a manual process, but it all comes out to roughly the same amount of caffeine for the different types of brewing methods. An 8-ounce cup of brewed coffee contains roughly 70 to 140 milligrams of caffeine. And that accounts for some of the different variables on brewing methods and things like that. But on average, it's about 95 milligrams of caffeine per 8-ounce cup of brewed coffee. Then there's espresso, which is made by putting a small amount of hot water or steam through finely ground coffee beans. Espresso does have more caffeine per volume than coffee, but because it's usually a smaller serving size, it actually has less if you're looking at the serving of espresso versus a cup of coffee. A single shot of espresso, say 30 to 50 millimeters or 1 to 2 ounces, has about 63 milligrams of caffeine. And therefore, a double shot has roughly 125 milligrams of caffeine. Now, what about espresso-based drinks? They're pretty popular, and they're usually made by mixing various amounts of milk with a shot of espresso. You've got your lattes, your cappuccinos, your Americanos, and all sorts of other really popular, good-tasting drinks. And these are basically the same amount of caffeine as your espresso because they're made with a shot of espresso. So, unless you're getting a double, a single regular drink would be about 63 milligrams of caffeine. Next up, we've got instant coffee. And while I'm not a big fan of it, a lot of people are, and it's a big seller. So, we need to look at how much caffeine is in a cup of instant coffee. You make instant coffee by stirring in some instant coffee crystals into your boiling or hot water and stirring it up. Now, the interesting thing about instant coffee is it usually contains less caffeine than brewed coffee, about 30 to 90 milligrams depending on how much you put in and the type of instant coffee you're using. That's 30 to 90 milligrams per 1 cup. Then we've got decaf, decaffeinated coffee. And the name here can be a little deceiving because you would think with it being decaffeinated, there isn't any caffeine. But that's not exactly true. Decaffeinated coffee can have anywhere from 0, so some of the better ones, depending on the brand, and the process used can have as little as 0, none, but most have about 3 to 7 milligrams of caffeine per cup, with the average being about 3 milligrams. So granted it's low, but it's still not 0, which is what you might assume from the name. So the bottom line here, your average 8-ounce cup of brewed coffee contains about 95 milligrams of caffeine on average. Your single espresso or espresso-based drink contains about 63 milligrams of caffeine on average. And decaf, despite its name, contains about 3 milligrams of caffeine for your average cup. So now you know just how much caffeine is in that cup of coffee you're drinking. If you've just had a question erupt, be sure and write in the comments below or send us an email to questionuseruptus@gmail.com and let us know what it is so we can answer it for you.